Hi there. I just want to tell you that from time to time, Dan and I are going to interject to explain something we believe deserves further clarification. And in this instance, we're going to talk about 5-point Calvinism. Just as Dan mentioned, that may seem really, really boring, but stick with me. It's actually shapes more of Christianity than you could imagine. So, for anyone who isn't familiar with Christian theology or church history, Calvinism is based on the teachings of a man named John Calvin, one of the original bad boys of church history. Calvin helped inspire radical dissent against the Catholic Church in the early 16th century, but the guy who kind of opened the door for him to do that was a man named Martin Luther. You may be more familiar with this because of Martin Luther King Jr., he was named after him, and there's an entire denomination of Christians called Lutherans. It's because of him. In all fairness, Luther was a titan of Christian reformers, and he did implement a lot of helpful changes. But John Calvin is to Martin Luther what Kanye is to Jay-Z. So I hope that helps some of you understand what we're talking about here.
Calvin seems like an angry man.
That's right, Dan, and his anger is directly connected to his 5 core beliefs, also known as his Institutes or Tulip. The cutest acronym possible for one of the most tragic theological perspectives out there. Tulip is as follows. T stands for total depravity. Basically, you're garbage. I'm garbage too, though, and even babies are garbage and go to hell since they're born into inherited sin. So if you wonder why so many people baptize their infants, that's one of the main reasons. And this flies in the face of everything God says right from the get-go in Genesis, which is the first book of the Bible, where he basically tells humanity, all creation, all of humanity is good from the moment God creates them. Next, U stands for Unconditional Election, meaning there is no free will. Nothing you have done or chosen to do or thought about doing matters because God decided what's going to happen from the very get-go. He chooses who's in and who's out. And here's a direct quote from a Calvinist advocacy group that says, quote, God chooses without any consideration of merit within the individual, nor does God look into the future to see who would pick him. You would think this is a frightening belief to embrace, but there's nothing Calvinists get a big chubby over more than the thought of God choosing them and not you, no matter how much sweeter, kinder, and gentler and nobler you may be. Next, L stands for limited atonement. Turns out, Jesus only died for a few select people. Weird. Feels like a lot to go through for just a few select people, am I right? This could not be more diametrically opposed to everything we believe about Christ's sacrifice and universal acceptance of all people. Let me say that again because that's huge. His universal acceptance of all people. All right? That's what we believe. Next, I stands for Irresistible Grace. And we're basically splitting theological hairs at this point because it's kind of the same thing as unconditional election. Basically what it's saying is we can't refuse God's grace. Think Paul on the road to Damascus in Acts 9. And if you know what I'm talking about, pick up a Bible, turn to the New Testament, read Acts 9, and hopefully you understand. But that's kind of a weird place to start, so maybe don't do that. But basically, Paul was straight up murdering Christians, and then God appeared, picked him. He's like, you're on my team now. Let's do this. Paul was like, holy shit. Well, I guess we're going to do this. Everything I've ever believed and known is wrong. Let's do this. Paul has no power to resist God's work in his life because his salvation was, wait for it, predestined. The Calvinist favorite word, there it is. And this ties exactly into P, which stands for perseverance of the saints. The popular phrase for this in the church is, once saved, always saved. Anyone who is lucky enough to be chosen or predestined to go to heaven can never lose their VIP pass, no matter what you do. Okay, all right, look, I know I didn't give Calvinists a very fair shake in this whole segment, but Calvin literally believed in a God that created massive amounts of people just to send them to hell for all eternity. So, not really our kind of guy, not really our kind of God. Praise be. Praise be. I'm assuming you said it back. All right, now back to Dan's story.